Firstly, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Vested Triker webinar. Today's webinar is all about ESOP Essentials, so employee share schemes, share options. Trying to give you a guide to the ownership effect, the benefits, and the legal know-how on how this all works. Today we've got some of the real stars of the startup ecosystem in India joining us, massive celebrities in their own right. I'll just name them individual. We've got Khushbu from Upgrad. Everybody knows Upgrad as the integrated lifelong learning tech platform. I think one of the absolute stars of the Indian startup ecosystem. We've also got Kapil from Mensa Brands. I'm sure most of you, if not knowing Mensa Brands, certainly know many of the brands, both in FMCG and beauty, that they create and run. We've got Mayank from Legality, another amazing platform that helps people with all the documentation, e-signing or the e-stamps, which when you look at all the documentation that you need in India, is massively valuable. And then we have also Chinappa from Velocity, and Velocity is India's leading financial solutions provider. So welcome to the session, guys. Let's kick off with an initial conversation around the understanding of ESOPs to start off with. I think there has been lots of talk about ESOP successes and notional failures or irrelevance in some people's minds. But for me, I think it's absolutely imperative. The whole idea of vested was built on the notion of the ownership effect. That being that everybody who's key to the success of a business, whether it's the founders, investors, team members, strategic advisors, whoever it is, they should have some skin in the game. They should be vested in that business's success. So I've put my cards on the table, as it were, but let's see what our panelists think about ESOPs in general. So if I can start with you, Khushbu, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you decided to join us today.
Sure, great. Thanks, Apteet. Hello, everyone. This is Khushbu here, and I've been with Upgrad for almost 9 odd years, and I do take care entire legal and secretarial requirements for the company. And I've been associated with Trica for almost 5 years, and we have been using the tool. And one of my interactions with FT is where we came across saying that, okay, why don't you share your thoughts to the larger audience, and that's why I was happy to be here. In relation to ESOPs as a tool to incentivize employees, or in a general parlance as to how employees pursue it, honestly, it's a very it's not that familiar as what we think as stakeholders who are closer to the topic. When we speak to a salesperson on the ground and ask them what are ESOPs, they are like, okay, there's something which has been offered to us as a part of our comp, and we have just kept it aside. We don't know what to do with it. And that is exactly the ground reality, where at least we have been very consciously working to ensure that we sensitize the employees across all levels, and lines of what ESOPs mean and what are the success stories where employees have seen it turning to a fortune for themselves. And it's a sure reward for you being with the association and your contribution to the organization. And once that sensitization has happened throughout the ecosystem, the entire perspective of an employee seeing to this tool has changed drastically. And that's where I guess the core difference lies, the real value of ESOPs lie.
Brilliant. Thank you, Khushbu. Kapil, how about you?
And just hey, Yeah. No, thanks, Khushbu, for your perspectives on that. Actually, not a substantial lot to add. But hey, just as a quick introduction, I head up HR at Mensa Brands. I've been here for 2+ years now. Uh, Mensa is only a 3.5-year-old company, so Khushbu, not as fortunate as you to have spent 9 years as yet, but hope to do a longer stint here. Uh, Overall experience 20+years, but my last longest stint was Flipkart. So at least I think in the last 7 or 8 years of my career, I have sort of experienced private unlisted ESOPs quite heavily, both as someone at the other end of the table who's sort of granting options to employees to ensure they stay motivated and have a slice of ownership in the company, and as a beneficiary of stock options myself as well in certain parts. I would echo what Khushbu says. I think uh, for the ones who get the logic around stock option plans, I think the slice of ownership can actually just work wonders, right? As in that 5 to 10% additional discretionary part that you put on the table in terms of how people stretch and how they feel ownership for a company, uh, can just mean, I think, can just bring significant benefits to any organization. I very honestly believe that. And it's just that additional delta, right? As in between thinking about, my job like a job versus actually thinking like I own a small part of the business. The second part of it, obviously, is wealth creation. I think, uh, my prior company, Flipkart, had a great track record with that because I think even though there were small, bits and pieces of liquidation, but whenever there was an opportunity with a fundraise, I think putting a little bit of money in the pool to make sure that the larger group of team members actually get to enjoy something out of it made the entire idea of options very real on the ground. So I think that was very significant as well. But I would completely echo with Khushbu that for the larger masses, I believe that understanding is still quite patchy, needs a lot of education. I think forget about actually uh, uh, relatively junior executives or sales folks and everything. I think even with somewhat senior talent, if I'm actually hiring them from companies where they have not had access, it takes a lot of effort to actually build scenarios, help them understand what ups and downs could potentially look like. uh, how if they are negotiating with me, they should not be negotiating with me on a few $1,000s of cash, but maybe a few tens of $1,000s of maybe stocks, because those few thousands of dollars of cash will not necessarily change anyone's life. But I think for a company that's performing well, an option grant could actually turn into gold in due course. So I think it takes
As
to yeah, it takes a lot of effort to actually help people understand that side of the story. And I think the ones who do, I've seen them becoming pure converts over a period of time. So yeah, that's from my side of the.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, you're one of the poster boys, and certainly Flipkart as an organisation are one of those that shows everybody what's possible. So thank you, Kafil. How about you, Mayank?
Yes.
Unmute.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Mayank. I lead finance at Legality. It's been 5 years here at Legality, and I totally echo what Kapil said, that having a slice of ownership gives you something, a chance at wealth creation, which would not be possible with the regular job. And in the recent years, with the IPOs that have been coming up, Zomato, Flipkart, Swiggy, we have all seen the power of ESOPs, how wealth has compounded for the early employees who were there in the company. And also there is significant lack of education regarding ESOP taxation and how the general taxation is built around ESOP in the Indian startup ecosystem. So yes, so there is a huge need of education that is needed right now, and how we can go about it. And generally, many companies have two major features of ESOP. That is that they don't generally grant it to every employee in the company, and once they exit, you have to exercise those ESOPs within a certain time frame. In the second option, they might not see a liquidity in the near term, but they eventually have to pay taxes on that within at the time of exercise. So here at Legality, we have tried to make a ESOP policy very employee friendly in a way that everybody in the company gets a chunk of the company through ESOP, and we allow exercise of ESOPs even after they've left the company. So anybody who's left today can come back at the time of liquidation event and exercise their options. So in that way, we have tried to make ESOPs more exciting for everyone, and it's one of the best uh, employee-friendly practice, which makes Legality have an NPS score of 98 as well.
Brilliant.
So that I think that founders mindset on creating liquidity for everyone, not just for themselves. I think that propels ESOPs for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Merrick. I think you're spot on. Firstly, it is very complicated, and part of the whole essence of Vested and Triker is to take away that complexity so that people can actually see and feel the tangibility of it. And I'm absolutely with you in terms of every single team member is key to the success of your business. And even if it's a small amount, for each person to have something really does change the dynamic. So with that, let's move across to you, Chinapa. Do you want to give us a feel for how it's working for you over at Velocity?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Very good afternoon. It's been my journey, more than 15 plus years of experience in the industry. I have been worked with multiple startups, and this is the long journey with Velocity, almost 4 years and 1 month now. And I take care of entire HR function in Velocity. So see, ESOP will help me each and every leadership hiring for the role, right, which we hire. That is really, you know, negotiate with the candidate for the salary discussions in terms of retaining the candidate while appraisal time. Also, convince the candidate for these to join the startup. ESOP is the one of the great advantage to convince the candidate. Top of that, whenever we have the the competitors in the market, right? Obviously, benchmarking that ESOP's value, granting options, and wasting period, etc. It is really advantage. Also, we can have this startup ecosystem entire in the Bangalore, which we have the talent pool, right? They are aware of it. 95% of employees, especially in tech or non-tech or leadership hiring, they are aware of it. So that's how it is really helped me a lot in the hiring the top talent in the market. So I always have the ESOP heavy and the other basic or maybe like a fixed plus variable will be different. We pursue the candidate. That's how we hire the top talent. But it is really helpful for us for the ESOP while negotiating with the candidates.
Brilliant. Now, being ESOP heavy for me is obviously critical. I mean, ESOPs are that long wavelength reward. There's all the day-to-day salary, spot bonuses, etc., which are great for the individual, but it's tying everybody into that long wavelength reward of the success of the enterprise, of the business, that I think is key. So let's stay with you, Chinapa. From your understanding, what do you think some of the biggest misconceptions of ESOPs are, either at Velocity or indeed in the ecosystem that you're part of?
Yeah. So it is according to, I believe, like according to me, it is very constructive way I can put that. Across the market in the top talent, wherever you approach the candidate, they'll be very having the background about the ESOP, how it works, in terms of market value, in terms of the stock options, how much they are going to give, what is the granting date, what is the total value of the ESOP. That's how we can convert the candidate overall, right?
Yeah. Okay. I guess that's useful. It also comes back to the whole piece about understanding what is in the ESOP or the proposition. I think Khushbu is one of our longest standing customers at Triker, which is now run by Vested. Do you want to tell us the difference from your perspective, the transparency that having a tool or dashboard helps relative to, firstly, from your work as leading the HR and COSEC piece and running the background to this, but also from a recipient perspective, from the team members and how they can engage?
Yeah, so as we talk about ESOPs, ESOPs is generally seen as a component of your compensation that has been offered to you. And unfortunately or fortunately, ESOPs is that only piece which uh, is not that you see every day, right? Like a salary would come to you every month, or your variable would be an annual cycle where you will always go and visit it across. But ESOPs is as and when the company progresses and your life cycle with the company progresses is where it comes in. And you tend to forget about it. And it would be only one fine day you will wake up and, oh yeah, I thought there was some ESOP as well. What are the dynamics of it? How much do I have? And if there is a employee who has been with the organization for long, chances are high that the employee would want to have a full visibility of it at a single place of uh, 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 tool. And that's where actually Trica helped us across the board to give that transparency to the employee in lines of what do the ESOPs currently valued at, what are the number of ESOPs you have, what is the vesting schedule looking like, what are the other dynamics around on it.
Yeah.
And that actually helps them to keep it as a repository, but at the same point in time also be updated about the tool that gives them the visibility of those ESOPs that they hold on a real-time basis versus waiting for someone to respond from an HR or from a person who's managing ESOPs for the organization.
Yeah, I guess it gives them that real-time evaluation. And from your experience, have you seen people doing lots of what-if analysis? What if the share price gets to a certain number, or do they just take the numbers that have been put into the platform from
It does, right? Because that's where they see the value creation. And actually, that is also one of the points where we do talk actively about what has been the change in the valuation and what does it mean for an individual holding ESOPs in the organization. At the same point in time, the biggest misconception that we can talk about with the employees is the fact that they think it's coming free of cost to them. So it's generally not the case. There is a strike price attached to it, which is more technical, but at the same point in time, important for an employee to understand that if you're holding an X number of ESOPs, what is the strike price at which it is coming to you? What are the taxation implications? Because the entire experience of someone holding ESOPs is ruined when they get to know at the time of liquidity, thinking, oh, I thought it was X valued ESOPs, but actually I'm going to get only 70% of that in my bank account. And that's where the education on ESOPs becomes much more relevant to do it from day one so that they get the picture right. And then the incentivization to ensure that they are motivated enough is on the right track.
Yeah, because historically it's just been a set of documents, maybe 20, 30 pages of legal stuff that most people just will not read, let alone understand. So I think it is important to keep it simple and straightforward for all recipients to be able to engage with that. But turn to you, Mayank, as the financial guy on this front. And giving some guidance for other founders, how would you structure, what would you tell founders who are looking at this as an opportunity to engage and, as Chinapa was saying, recruit people? How would you structure an ESOP scheme for the first few hires rather than all the team when you're looking at your first little core team?
All right. So I think the initial ESOP pool that generally gets decided in a startup is around 10%, 10 to 12% of the total equity base. And basis that the initial hires, depending upon the urgency or importance of that function, that plays a very key part in determining what are the number of ESOPs that should be allotted. And obviously your date of joining, how early you were in the startup. Somebody joining at a seed series stage will obviously get more ESOPs than someone who has joined at a series A or series B stage. So that definitely plays a very important role. And generally what I've seen, I think uh, initial hires can look at having 0.1, 0.2% of the total ESOP pool that is there. So that also plays a very important role into determining what should be your ESOP pool.
So you've got your co-founders, the founder, co-founder, so they will have the majority of the stake. But then that 10%, you're saying talk to people with that percentage in mind. And you were saying 0.1%. I mean, if let's say your initial 10 non-founder, co-founder people, how would you distribute that 10%?
So for all different functions, the criteria is obviously different. But with respect to founders equity, also as soon as funding kicks in, their shareholding also becomes graded vesting. It's not like that they can exit out immediately and cash out all their equity. Their equity also kinds of become graded vesting. So all of us, including employees and founders, are deeply invested in the startup success. But again, there is no set rule as to what should be the criteria for a key hires ESOP. It all depends on the role situation and how well you are able to negotiate with the founders on your ESOP.
So you would say don't just take what's put on the table. Be willing and open to negotiating.
Yes. So for that, I think you should rather than just accepting ESOPs, I think the main criteria is whether that ESOP will lead to a liquidity event in the future or not. So for that, you have to evaluate the business model, the vision and mission of the company, whether that ESOPs will lead to some equity like liquidity in the future. So not just accept ESOP, evaluate what those ESOPs can do for you.
Yeah, I think that goes both ways as well, both for the recipient and the founder or the founding team. ESOPs, everything should be based on some sort of conditionality, and generally it's tenure, but sometimes you can also incorporate elements of delivery or provide more ESOPs based on better performance by the individual. So, Kapil, you have lots of experience in this space. As we said earlier, you've benefited nicely. So, from your perspective, what's the hardest part of actually launching a scheme? Because that's what you've done at Mensa Brands as well. But how did it feel when you were heading towards monetization at Flipkart and updating and making sure people knew what was going on with the ESOPs?
Got it. So I think a few things come to mind. If I were to sort of get away from the legality of I think just doing it, making sure that the right contractual documents are in place, making sure that there is mutual understanding of how employees and companies are protected over the longer term based on grants that they're getting. I think that's crucial, and that's something which I believe there is a lot of advice available on today in the market, and you can manage that. I think the two three things I've sort of encountered as interesting challenges, I think, is one is how do you, I think, from, starting from the point of, let's say, the first few grants, the inception of an employee, down to, uh, the first 10 team members, down to the first 20 team members. And once you start hitting the number of, 50, 60, 100 and stuff like that, uh, I think the principles actually change drastically from affordability to consistency, as in what can I give? And At some point in time, I think very quickly you start asking yourself, am I being consistent or not? Because I think people start asking that question,
Yeah.
that, there isn't too much gap between me and this person joining. Was it just all about negotiation or not? Because ultimately, I think India is India. I think folks get to hear stuff. Yeah. So,
India is India, Kapil. That's a great statement.
Chinese whispers, works, and I think any imperfection in the plan will get amplified, unfortunately. Uh, I think managing that has been one challenge, Ifti, that I've actually been through. I think the second one is, even when we thought that we were being consistent, I think, how do you attribute value to a band, to a function, etc. I think started becoming a little bit of a challenge. As in, I think I can go back from history to, let's say, my experiences, and at some point in time, I think, in one of the organizations I worked for, I think there used to be a very, very large differential in how functions would be rewarded based on ownership. And at some point in time, I think that became a very hard-hitting question. As the number of team members started increasing, to say that, look, an owner is an owner is an owner, right? As in, how can you say my job is lesser or more than someone else's role and stuff like that? So I think, even consistently at that point in time, at those junctures, being able to think through principles of consistency very sharply, and the downstream consequences of how, because the worst thing that can happen is that you give a great reward and people still feel cheated, right? So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, it just doesn't do any good to anyone. So I think that's the other piece I've been through. I think the third one which comes to my mind, uh, uh, is uh, is a liquidity, and fourth one, frankly, is, I think, the attribution of performance. So I think I can talk briefly about both. Liquidity, I think, is very obvious. Mayank spoke about it at length. I think it's the only vehicle to making it real, and for a lot of people who are, first time observers to a plan like this one. I think the performance piece is something which has actually baffled me as well, and we've tried something different at Mensa Brands, till recently. Uh, uh, so, the conventional parameters, as you mentioned, Ifti, some time back, has been, to fundamentally link it to tenure, to say that, I think, based on
Yeah.
a certain shareholding investing criteria, I think here's how you will realize your options. And then when there is a liquidity event, there is a certain portion of your vested options that can potentially be realized as cash, or be monetized. So that's fine. I think the piece that I used to struggle with is that, look, I think I would, in my past instances, actually have free riders who would have performed well, got a good grant at some point in time, negotiated a good grant, uh, be in situations where they necessarily did not keep up with the levels of performance that, I think was promised. But they were still vesting significant portions of value for the company. And then other people start looking around and saying, hey, that's not right. And we toyed, and we sort of, flirted with the idea of, bringing in a performance element into stocks multiple times. And for one reason or the other, I think, because I think changing tracks is a little bit more difficult, I think we were not able to do that. We've tried that at Mensa. I don't know how that will play out. It's been a recent phenomena. The Trika team is aware of it, Ifti, but
Yeah.
we do have our own, listing IPO options, and aspirations at this point in time. And obviously, I think for that, a certain level of governance, compliance, and brand performance is super crucial. So we've gone ahead and
Yeah.
essentially, done some aggressive grants to say that, look, I think based on how you are able to maintain performance for your brands, there is a certain multiplier that you can potentially access and invest a lot more. Uh, uh, and uh, And I think that's created a phenomenal level of excitement on the floor. And we find people actually giving it, their 150% to really see, what can happen. So again, like I said, it's a recent phenomena. I yet need to see how this plays out, but I believe it's a bold experiment that we did. Actually, not my idea. I think my founder's idea. But we are hoping that fundamentally, as long as it drives the organization in the right direction, I think we are more or less home. So yeah, I think is it real? How do we? I think I would really play a lot of emphasis on consistency, because thinking that through early on is very, very crucial. And then comes to the piece around how do we enable some level of monetization, and last but not the least, I think to starting to think about performance elements, I think is the way forward, frankly, is what I believe.
Well, again, we are on exactly the same page. At different levels in an organization, people have different influences and capabilities of making a difference. So for me, certainly as you get more senior in an organization, more should be at risk and as an upside. So the the promise that people come into roles with, all of you will know, people will promise all sorts of stuff. It's about what's actually delivered that they should have a reward, and we're easily able to do that with money. Cash, we're able to get our heads around. It's actually not materially different from an ESOP perspective. You can have those who will have that just pure tenure related stuff, but then there is the stuff around performance. And yes, it does make it more complicated, but part of what we do at Vested and at Trika is to get rid of that complexity. Just you just need to have a clear understanding of what you'd like to achieve, and we'll help you make that happen. So Chinapa, from your perspective, when do you think it's important to start using technology to help you in the space of managing ESOPs? So obviously, when founders are just setting up their business, there might be just a few people in the team. But at what stage, from your perspective, do you think it's useful to let somebody help you with this part of the business and the reward?
Yeah. So when we have hiring across the functions, when you go for either product or tech or maybe business strategy roles, right? Obviously, we hire people from co-founder or founder background, so they might be aware of it, how ESOP ecosystem will work, and also they knows the background about the company, what stage exactly the company into, and what kind of uh, the value will get it once the maybe vesting period is getting over. Also, they wanted to set their mind to join for the company to stay long, because uh, the vesting period will be minimum 1 year locking period will be there, right? 12 months. Obviously, they will also stick back with the company, and then they can we will they can also think about working very closely with the cross functional heads. They will understand more the value of the ESOP. Also, when we go for when we go for any uh, appraisal cycle, right? Obviously, we can retain the employees first thing. Secondly, we can add the ESOP whoever is doing good. For example, junior folks, if they are really doing good, we can add the ESOPs so that it will help the last moment changing their mindset and decision, stay back with the company. So that also will create a lot of value for the ESOP, adding
I
top
was
of the
thinking more, Chinapa, I was thinking more to, like, when you are setting these schemes up, there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of documentation, and it's one thing for the management to keep on top of, but then also for the recipients and the communication to the recipients. At what stage would you say that you would use a tool to help you? Now that we don't have, I mean, everything can be started and supported with digital support. All of you guys all run digital first businesses. But at what stage would you advise a founder to use a tool like Triker?
Yeah.
Right from the start?
See, yeah, I'm sorry. Uh, when I started using this Trika tool, right, it is very uh, easy tool. While onboarding the employee, addition, even exit the employee. Also, dashboard is very eco-friendly. We can download a dashboard. What is the transaction is happening? Adding into the individual employee or bulk employees also exit, and granting options, especially for the management side. It is very easy to do the transaction for the tracker portal. Yeah, it is very, even for the employee perspective, no need to worry about even employee leaves the organization. The moment we exit the employee, he will get the credentials to log into his secondary email ID, and then you can see what is happening inside the company. What is exactly the kind of status. They'll get in touch with on the portal itself.
Yeah, because it saves a lot of time. Every employee will, firstly, as I said, with the setup, just taking away some of that headache is great. But every employee, if they need to come to a finance guy or a HR person to find out about what their option situation is, it's just a lot of leadership time that's consumed. That once you start valuing your time, I think you'll realize just how powerful a tool like Triker Invested can be for people. But let's move back to the ecosystem and the more macro stuff that's going on at the moment. So it'd be great to come back to all of you now with this question. So I'll give you a moment or two to think about it. But what are you seeing in terms of trends and changes in terms of ESOPs, buybacks from companies, and that whole conversation around secondaries and the ability to liquidate your options either through a big event or even interspersed liquidity events? Is that something that you're hearing about or that you have thoughts about that you'd like to share? So Khushbu, can we start with you?
So it's actually a reality where, yes, there are enough talks about secondaries, buybacks by the company. And just to echo what Mayank also was mentioning, that's actually the best testament to give to an employee that it really values something. So actually, out of sure conscious decision of ensuring that there is enough attention paid to that liquidity alternatives as well for ESOP holders, companies are actively looking into buybacks and secondaries from time to time. That also actually also helps the employees to see its real value. Maybe they may have not personally experienced it, but these stories do spread across and create that positive vibe that yes, the secondary market is real and it is there out. You just have to wait and have your turn around when it comes next for your um, liquidity options. Apart from that, the entire ecosystem on IPO and in lines of an exit at the time of an IPO, again, that is getting much real in lines of startup ecosystem, and the tenure for a company 20 years back to go to an IPO journey versus a startup going today to an IPO journey has also shortened for various good right reasons, but that's what the journey life cycle for an IPO event has also come down to the hard reality that helps an employee to see that yes, this is going to materialize and I don't need to wait for 20 years. It is just going to be enough for me to contribute to the company for its growth, and at the same point in time there is enough personal incentive to be invested in the company for the person's own growth as well.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, I think that personal feeling and thinking it's not going to be 20 years is key. What about you, Mayank?
So
Any trend you're seeing?
yes, so I think with news of buybacks, IPOs coming in, people are more receptive to the idea of ESOPs now. And recently, I even saw launch of new funds who are only dealing with doing secondaries in companies, and through which they can give liquidity to ESOP holders. So I think that is one of the
Mhm.
key reasons, and people are also more receptive towards it. And there also has to be a healthy mix of your cash compensation and your ESOP compensation, because at the end of the day, cash helps to pay the bill. Like ESOP, a paper ESOP right now might not hold too much value.
Yeah.
But 5 years down the line, it could be worth millions. But the bills are due today. So that also needs to be taken into consideration right now.
So Kapil, when thanks, Mayank, for I mean, but going back to the millions, I mean, from your perspective, people at Flipkart, what proportion do you think ended up with more net reward from the ESOPs versus their salary?
Actually, putting numbers would be very difficult, Ifti. I think
No, just gauge,
because
just a finger in the air.
yeah, because I do think that from a the multipliers also change very significantly as you
Yeah,
go up in the organization. So I think uh, definitely the top 10-15% of the organization through multiple buybacks might have actually benefited in terms of multiples, with respect to what cash compensation in any particular year would have looked like.
yeah,
But my sense is that even if you go to mid levels and not too lower down in the organization, I think the reward was very meaningful.
yeah,
Is would be my sense. At least to make it very very real. That being said, on the broader question that you have, I do think that. I won't say positive or negative, but I think the market is still evolving, is what I would say. Because for every company that I think has some history of liquidation and monetization, at least in the unlisted space, fundamentally, I think there is probably four or five that have not been able to promise much liquidation or monetization. And there would probably be another 10 that actually were startups that never really saw the light of the day. And that's just a little bit of a name of the game, because I think the
absolutely.
probability of that level of success is always very, very low. I also think that the secondary market is still quite underdeveloped in the country. I do think that the only time it does get activated is maybe closer to any company essentially announcing a public event. Uh, but otherwise, I think even with let's say companies that have a reasonably strong history of performance, but without necessarily a liquidity event inside, I don't necessarily think that there is a lot of offtake in the secondary market and stuff like that. So my sense is, I think that's also probably a function of evolution. I'm sure in 2 to 5 years from now, all of this will look a little bit different. But that's my sense.
Yeah. Now, picking up on that, Chinapa, what do you think on the secondaries in particular, especially for unlisted entities, which is where most of us are currently working? How do you think that's going to evolve?
Yeah, it's depends on the company stage also. It is like as rightly mentioned, Mayank and Kapil. So depends on the company of the stage, either it is a seed funding or Series A, B, C, or where they are going to be next sessions, like a next kind of phase.
Hmm.
Uh, Either it is IPO or maybe liquidity. Depends on the depends on the market again, and also the industry. Uh, Also the kind of uh, you know uh, can say overall business. So based on that, I think it will goes for valuation.
Hmm. I think that I think India, as I think many on the panel now have said, it is a journey, and we're at that early stage. I guess part of that early stage comes to the whole notion of how many startups or indeed businesses in India are actually using ESOPs or the ownership effect or that participation in building the business. Because I think of the few 100,000 startups, I'm not sure that there's many more than 20% or so that 20, 30% that are actually using ESOPs properly. What would your gauge be, Khushbu? What percentage of startups do you think are actually using ESOPs?
I think it would be much more than 20% because the entire education amongst founders or amongst the audience who's starting a business or is looking to be an entrepreneur themselves, they
Yeah.
use ESOPs more to incentivize great talent at the start of their journey where they don't actually have too much to burn on cash, but also has a great story to tell about. And that's where the entire pickup on using ESOPs as a tool to incentivize great talent on day one would be much more than 20% in my opinion.
Okay. Anybody else? Couple, what do you reckon? What percentage? Because I'm pleased that you think it's higher than that, Khushbu.
Sorry, Ifti, can you pose the question once again?
What proportion, if we just take the general Indian businesses out of the space, but if we're focusing on startups, what percentage of the few 100,000 startups that we know that are registered with Startup India, what proportion do you think will be using ESOPs?
I personally think the number could be pretty high, actually. As in, I think how widely they might be distributing internally could vary a lot. So some might actually just keep it to the top 10 folks versus I think some would have a practice of giving it to everyone. Guess is a guess. I would go for 60, 70%. Yeah.
Okay, Mayank, what's your number?
So I think the number would vary a bit if we just look at the number of startups registered under Startup India program. The number could vary around 30 to 40%, but the actual startups which are using ESOPs to their full potential, I think it would be less than 2 or 3%.
Oh, wow.
So
Very, very few.
challenge.
So what do you mean by using it properly?
So I think first there are a few startups which create ESOPs as a part of investor mandates that once funding kicks in, you have to create an ESOP pool, and then they may not be very regular in allocating those ESOPs and creating liquidity. So on paper, it would look they would have an ESOP pool, but in reality, that ESOP pool might not be functioning the best of their capacity.
Yeah,
So,
and I guess there's a lot of compliance as well. So going back to what you're saying, it's maybe a lot of them have not maintained that compliance.
yes.
And Chinapa, what would you reckon? What do you think of the proportion of the few 100,000 Startup India startups?
I can agree with Khushbu because there are a lot of startups give the ESOPs because they would like to attract the talent. If you are scaling up the company, obviously they wanted to attract the talent to join. Otherwise, uh, people will not be showing interest level to join the company, right? Why they will join, leaving the MNC or corporate to join startup? Obviously they want to get some benefit, like call it as like a ESOP or maybe some other benefits. ESOP is the biggest value so that they can join, they will also stay back with the company. For that reason, obviously, I could say around 30-40% will be there in the market.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, I guess there is a range of numbers, but there's also an importance there that I think came out in terms of the compliance. It might even be a large number, but if it's not compliant, it's just not valid. So that's a bit of a cautionary note for us to take there. I'm just thinking, given that we've got such a wonderful audience participation here as well, we've got a few questions that came in as people registered to join the session today. So I'm going to pick out just a couple of or a few of those to ask you guys. And the first one is about and some of you will have less experience of this, but certainly heading towards it. What's the difference, or what's going to be the change in your ESOP strategy pre and post an IPO? So let's start with you, Kapil, with your experience.
Yeah. So we haven't started thinking very deeply about it, FT, but I think we are very conscious that significant parts of ESOP costs that are widely held at this point in time will at some point in time come and sit in the P&L. So I think so we are conscious that as in ultimately it will become a strong line item that contributes to or takes away from EBITDA and overall profitability and stuff like that. Will be a part of employee costs. So look, I think there's definitely a significant portion that we did at the time of founding the company. We then looked at there was a period of, let's say, more business as usual option grants that actually happened. We then potentially did something which is more in line with us getting ready for an IPO, to say that, hey, I think let's incentivize and let's make sure that our functional leads and brand leads and make a meaningful difference to the path and the direction of the company are vested deeply enough and have an ownership to share as we get closer to an event. We do believe that pre-event we might actually look at some level of opportunity for people, opportunity for a buyback and potentially some level of vesting as well. Also based on, I think, where do valuations stand at that point in time, because I think there will always be a little bit of a game to see, based on organization performance, where do we stand, year 2 years from now. But after that, I think it'll be as we get closer to an IPO, we are also starting to sort of sense, sniff, and get advisory notes on what does good compliance mean with respect to I think proportion of compensation to ESOPs. Number two, making sure that from a public market perspective, we are able to demonstrate that whatever people are earning or making or getting rewarded is in line with performance of the company. And second, I think a little bit of a spin-off on the first one as well, that the amount to some extent is more capped from a pool perspective. So obviously can't share numbers here, but I think I think from what we've done from here on, the journey will be a little bit more compliance oriented, is what I would say.
Yeah, I think that compliance piece is important. I think just more generally, just a little plug for what we do. We help people create and manage their ESOP schemes, but we also help them manage everything to do with their equity, with their shares, with their options, with the execution and the creation or issuance of shares as well, because it does get very complicated. I mean, most of the company secretaries and finance people here in this room know just how painful and how easily things can get messed up. And certainly being IPO ready, having your cap table and all the information associated with your capital structure and issuance is so critical. And that's certainly something that Vested have been doing here in the UK and Europe for many thousands of businesses, is what we'll be bringing to India as well. But on the IPO, pre to post IPO sort of environment and changes, Mayank, what are your thoughts that you might do differently?
I think on the compliance front, when we go for an IPO, I think the manner of your ESOP valuation definitely changes when you move from the traditional accounting standards to the newly Ind AS or IFRS. I think that is one major key change that would happen when we move towards an IPO. And then there is option. Then you eventually get into very technical details as to option pricing under Black and Scholes model. So I think all that compliance angle definitely comes and play a very larger part in determining your ESOPs and what should be the number of ESOPs. Because at the time of IPO, the ESOP pool would have definitely reduced as it would have existed at Series A or seed series. So that limited number of ESOP pool has to be kept very competitive in order to attract new talent as well. So I think all those factors would come into play at the time of IPO. Like speaking purely from finance perspective.
Yeah, because I guess before the IPO, you will have several different rounds. You'll have different liquid preferences on the different series of investment rounds, and so it does get. It's actually probably more complex in some ways pre-IPO than it is post, from some perspectives. Maybe not from all the compliance perspectives, but Chinapa, what about your thoughts on that? You know, the pre-post IPO conversation, because everybody is aspiring for the IPO.
Yeah. So when we talk about IPO, pre-IPO or post-IPO, definitely, as Mayank told, depends on the stage of the company. So if it is going for like a Series A or Series B or Series A, based on that, it will be reducing the value also. Yeah. So that I agree with him. Yes.
Okay. This one's going a little bit off piece, or certainly off the ESOP space, but we've got a question from the attendees around what type of startups raise funds. That could be a very broad question, but from a company secretary perspective, Khushbu, can you help people understand what type of startups raise funds?
Honestly, funds are for everyone who can grab it, if I would have to put it that way. And there is no stereotype approach in lines of which startups would go for fundraise and which wouldn't. It's all about how great your business strategy looks like and what have you achieved and what are your goals that you want to achieve on. Um, the private equity market is accessible to anyone and everyone who wants to access it. There is no barriers as such. Yes, sometimes it is literally you need to be there at the right time, right place. But otherwise, in my opinion, I don't think there is any category of startups who would be approaching for fundraise, even in private equity, even from government funding in lines of the subsidies that have been offered across various schemes. There are no restrictions in particular that carves out a section of the startups in particular. Yes, government schemes do have their own restrictions and eligibility criteria, if I have to put it that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's at the end of the day available to anyone who can have it.
So it's not just about tech companies, it can be samosa walas as well. Anybody else got a thought on this? Open mic. What type of companies should get
I would say, as a type, in the sense, I would say two things, Ifti. One is, and then I think just making it a little bit more real in the context of, where we are as an organization and as well, and why we are thinking about it. I think is the business model approaching sustainability, because then we know that the need to access private markets might start reducing a little bit. I think that's one. The second I would say is, I think with business sustainability, I think are we also looking to make investments that will probably have a longer lead time. I think more R&D, more manufacturing, etc. which essentially then takes me to a place where I think access to more patient capital, I think becomes more premium than others. I think those are the two things that actually come to my mind from the standpoint of why we started thinking about it. Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Or shall we move to the next?
Yeah, it depends on the industry. Like if you go for any of the industry like started where like early stage companies, like where they enter into the newly to the business, like you be it like a e-commerce or B2B SaaS, or could be tech companies, or there are like depends on the domain to domain, I could say. Um, Majority of the in the Indian ecosystem, especially in the e-commerce industry, majority of the startups will have ESOP, right?
Cool. Okay, then let's move on. And this is to the other end of the scale. How do you simplify accounting for 1,000+ employees with buyback and repricing? It's a very technical question, maybe for a finance person, Mayank.
Okay, so I think for 1,000 people company with option for buyback and repricing, I think the base would be a strong tech tool which can undertake all that heavy lifting on the tech front, where we can show all those panels and where people can see that option that there is buyback and how the price movement has gone up or gone down with respect to their ESOP. On the accounting part, I would say the core premise is having a valuation report from the registered valuer. That really sets the base for your ESOP pricing as to how your ESOPs are priced. Obviously, there are fundraise the price post money valuation of your fundraise. But post a fundraise, eventually you have to keep valuing your ESOP at regular intervals or at the time of new ESOP issuance. So I think that really sets the tone on how ESOP valuation can be done. And once the initial setup is done, so if it is 100,000 or 10,000 employees, then it's pure Excel magic, which all the tools like Tricka support for us. So I think it's at the end of the day, if your basic accounting principles around ESOP are set, then it's purely Excel magic which comes into play at scale.
Yeah, I think it's so just to pull it back, Mayank, it's a little bit more than Excel magic that we do at Vested and Triker. That it is around the maths ultimately. Janapa, anything on the big employee number challenges?
Depends again, the kind of ESOPs has been allotted. For example, any of the headcount of the employee, like 1,000 if you give, it is completely different on the ESOP allotted here. I could say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. And Khushbu, next question. So ESOP structuring, planning and execution. How do you design the vesting periods?
So according to the requirements that it all boils down to why you are launching an ESOP plan or a structure. And typically the reasons that we see across founders is, okay, I want to incentivize my great talent or my top talent, and I want to have them at the organization for long term. So the core of ESOPs, the way the entire instrument was designed in the first place, was to ensure that the employee stays with you long and earns that value creation for you. So typically, vesting schedule ranges from 2 year, 3 year, 5 year. Generally, 5 years is the max that I've seen across various schemes, but it does go down to a year, 2 year as well, depending on what is the role, who's the individual given these ESOPs on, and how the organization sees ESOP creation as an incentive for the employee to look around. It also actually comes down to the point of what is the tenure that you think an employee needs to be in the system to create the difference in the system, right? So if you feel that a 6 month old employee in the organization or a 1 year old tenured employee may not be the right audience to create that difference in the organization, and the person actually needs to be at least 2 years in the organization to make that difference for the organization to see that success in that particular department, then typically we do see a 2 year vesting to ensure that it has been rightly rewarded against the profile the person has been handed over to do justice to the risk reward aspect of it. There have been times if it is a existing employee where it is an ongoing trend where the person has proven himself or herself in the past. We have even done a 1 year vesting schedule as well. But again, as per the law, we do need that 12-month cliff between a grant and a vesting, which there's no
Yeah.
workaround. So that is the bare minimum period that any employee will have to service for them to get the benefits of an ESOP as a structure. And at the same point in time, while designing the ESOP scheme and how the entire ecosystem of ESOPs will work at an organization level, it all boils down to what do you think ESOP as an instrument like, right? Like say, for example, there have been various companies who expect employees who are exiting to exercise ESOPs and only then leave the organization. Otherwise, those vested ESOPs will lapse.
Yeah.
Now, every unlisted public company may not have a liquidity available in next 6 months or a year for employees to exercise and get that liquidity. So, which means that when an employee is leaving the organization, the person will have to actually take a call whether I exercise it today, pay up my taxes with
Yeah.
no real visibility of whether this would be going up, down, where, which direction is it going to head on. On the contrary view, there have been schemes that I've seen across where the organization insists on employees retaining those vested ESOPs after the exit and only exercise when they have a real liquidity lined up for them to know their exit terms, and only then kind of pay up the taxes that are required to be on the exit. So it actually boils down to how you want to make it lucrative for employees, but at the same point in time, what are the basic fundamentals you want to achieve through this ESOP scheme? But broadly, there are segments where people have designed ESOP scheme to cater to the employee interest at the core of it, and at times for certain aspects in lines of taxation, in lines of to ensure that the employer is not shortchanged in any manner. There have been a lot of these aspects that gets baked into while preparing the ESOP scheme.
Brilliant. That's a very full answer, Hushbu. But building on that and on the taxation, we've also had a question coming in around phantoms. Do any of you just show me your hand, those who are familiar with phantoms? Okay. So this might be back to you then, Khushbu. How does taxation vary when it comes to phantom stocks versus ESOPs?
So ESOPs, I would put it across as more evolved as a concept and has much more literature for anyone to understand how ESOPs work. But phantom stocks are, as a matter of fact, RSUs or sweat equity linked to non-directors, which is originally the concept that we all talk about, or phantom stocks. All of these are more of incentives that have been designed, creative way of putting across ESOPs as a the intent that we are trying to achieve through ESOPs at the heart of it while designing these structures around on it. So for
Yeah.
phantom stocks, if I had to put it in layman language, we should just see it as a incentive that comes to you at a certain interval or an on occurrence of a certain event, versus ESOPs would be over a period of year where it would be a vesting schedule and there is a full life cycle that you have to cross through for you to actually see the liquidity, versus a phantom stock would be more like a contractual understanding between the two parties saying that, okay, fine, if you achieve A, B, and C, I would give you an upside equivalent to this. And it could be even determined with a parameter of a tenure that, okay, if you be in the organization for X number of years, you can structure it in whatever way we want to in lines of a contractual arrangement. There have been phantom stocks linked to equity as well, and phantom stocks linked to cash as well. So at the end of the day, it is, I would say, a subset of what we are trying to achieve through ESOPs, but slightly less regulated, less evolved. As we go down the lane, I guess it will also come down as a part of a regulated section around on it. In lines of taxation on phantom, again, limited knowledge that I have around on it. I guess it would be a one time the year that you give liquidity to the ESOP holder, to the phantom stockholders, is the year the company will take the full P&L hit, versus ESOP, it's scattered over the entire vesting schedule, and it's not that one year where the liquidity has been offered. So from a company standpoint, because of those dynamics, people do prefer its ESOPs over phantom stocks or RSUs or any stock, any sort of other incentives that you can structure it across on a similar lines, because at the end of the day, it would be more sitting in your P&L the year that you decide to give that liquidity.
Yeah, and yeah, just in case people aren't clear, a phantom is almost a proxy reward, whereas ESOPs are real shares or real options. A phantom will be something that uses the share price or the value of the business as a proxy for the reward that you might get. So you're still incentivized to help the business succeed, but it's not a direct equity participation. Let's try and pick up on some more of these questions that we've got. Again, I'll leave it to the floor rather than putting it all on Khushbu. So many of the startups announce ESOPs, but only a fraction see meaningful liquidity. What gap or what proportion would you say actually see or have a meaningful exit or a monetization, should we say?
So I'll put it this way, for ESOPs as such, if we have to put it across that whether a meaningful exit has been provided to ESOP holders in the past, yes, there have been enough instances, not from a startup ecosystem, I'm talking at a macro level. There have been enough instances in the past where employees have exited with a meaningful exit under ESOPs, and have actually started their own and tried, living a dream that they had been, wishing for years together. So from lines of whether this is real and that companies are able to give you that exit or not, it is there. It is kind of a situation which is not arbitrary, but yes, at the end of the day, it is real and it's out there. But I would say, if you are talking about whether should I get ESOPs or should I ask for ESOPs or not, and whether it will actually mean something to me, I would always say you are always betting on the company or always betting on the founders. It's like stock market, right? If I'm going and investing, I'm buying some stocks. At the end of the day, I'm betting on the company. And same is with ESOPs, because at the end of the day, if I have faith and if I have the confidence in the business and the founders in particular, then ESOPs will have its meaningful exit. So I would see from that lens where at the end of the day, you are taking a bet at the end of the day.
Chinapa, how many do you think have how many ESOP schemes do you think actually come to reality?
So it is a very tricky question for me, because the company which we are working now, it is like a still we are in the Series A stage. Um, depends on the company again. Also, when we call it as a ESOP, we always structure for 4 years vesting period. After 12 years, monthly vesting. That is how we lock it. That is the reason people also stay back for the company. And secondly, as Kushbu said, like it is really uh, you know uh, depends on the company here. Depends on the company to give the value to the employee again. Yeah.
Okay, Mayank, what do you reckon? How many people actually? We talked about the percentages earlier about how many have schemes. What percentage do you think will actually have a monetization of some kind?
I think that it all boils down to the startup's product market fit. If the startup is not able to achieve a PMF, or other external macro environments lead to downfall of the startup's business, I think that also plays a very major role in determining how ESOP liquidity will play out in the future. So today, ESOP policy will have good intent, but some external macro environment factor would might lead to the business downfall. So that key risk is definitely there. And as Khushbu rightly said, that it's taking a bet on the business. And if you feel that this business is can go 100x in the next 3 to 5 years, then your liquidity or your earnings can also go 100x along with it. So very hard to pinpoint what would exactly lead to startup liquidity, but a lot of external factors also playing a key role each day as we move forward.
Yeah, I guess it's that secondary market as well, and the visibility and the reality of a secondary market will determine just how many in the future can get that liquidity. Just mindful of time now, so I'm going to just put one more to the table, and this is, and I've got an answer to this one as well. But one of the questions is, platforms used for ESOP pools and updating valuations, but they're usually only when you've got an investment round or something going on in the background. How can a company that's not raising but growing under its own steam, how can the person holding those ESOPs get a feel for what it's worth? Kapil, maybe you can pick this up for us.
Yeah. So so if your question is, uh, let's say, as in if I see my ESOPs on the Tracker platform at Mensa, as in, what's my level of trust in the underlying value of that option? Is that a fair question?
It's sort of like when you're raising funds, when you're doing Series A, B, C, you can get a real tangible view of what my shares are worth. But if your company is, you could argue doing very well, building itself under its own steam, so it's not going out raising capital, but it's still growing. How do you gauge the value of this ESOP thing?
Well, I think the last, post-COVID years have sort of, tested every principle on that particular front. So, look, I think I would agree with you, as in I think a company in the midst of a fundraise is probably the best placed, because I think as folks raise cash, for the team member cohort to start getting a perspective of, what's the real value of what I hold is much easier. I think discussions have gone all the way from multiples of revenue to multiples of EBITDA, etc., and that's a very significant shift that has happened over the last 2 or 3 years, as the maniacal funding, I think, has obviously been pulled back, and I think real cash flows, real EBITDA, real PAT is being sort of appreciated a lot more. So yeah, my own personal sense is uh, I think in the midst of a fundraise is best. In the absence of a fundraise, I would probably look at the competitor set of companies and really sort of do a benchmark to how am I performing? How's my revenue growing? What's the brand recall that I have in the market? What's my balance sheet looking like? What's my P&L looking like? I personally think that the P&L can be a little bit of a misnomer as well, because I think revenue lines might be one thing, EBITDA would be one thing, but looking at I think the balance sheet structure and how where do equity, debts, and everything actually stand for the company will have a meaningful and a tangible value to any liquidation process at the end of the day. So, and that part I think is a little bit more difficult for a layman to decipher. Becomes a lot more challenging. But I think looking at the competitive set of industries and just overlaying that with your financial performance and having a bit of a dipstick, I think is still. I think it's a reasonable formula. It's not too bad, I guess. It's in a vibe. I would just say manage your optimism. Yeah, is what I would think.
Manage your optimism. That's a good one. Surely, deliver your optimism would be another way of looking at it. Okay, guys. So I'm just going to ask you all to just give your one little sentence around the whole ESOP and equity participation of your teams. Just in closing, shall I say? So Chinapa, Mayank, then Kapil, and then Khushbu to bring it to a close before I bring this session to a close. So Chinapa, what's the one bit of gyan you would give to people around ESOPs?
Yeah. So, could you please just give me just repeat the question now, please?
So, what one piece of wisdom would you want to share in closing now, because we're just about to finish?
Yeah.
What one thing would you say to people when they're thinking about ESOPs or ESOP tools or how to do this? One piece of gyan.
Yeah. So overall, I can say the ESOP for the ESOP in the entire all the companies, especially in the startups, it is really a advantage to the company as well as the employer as well as the employee, when we call it as. And also if it is a fast-paced growing company, or could be Series B or Series C companies, definitely it is really attract the top talent in the market.
Thank you.
And also, if you look at across the industries, right, you can definitely discuss more and negotiate also with the candidates to get the top tier 1 institutes, colleges talent.
So people should negotiate. Mayank, thank you, Chinapa. Mayank?
Right. So I think ESOPs great tool for retention in today's market. When offered ESOP on both sides while negotiating or when asking for more ESOPs, I think keep an open mind with respect to business potential, how the market is operating in that industry. I think I hold that one notion about ESOPs, and which I tell to anyone who asks me about ESOPs on a very broader scale. I just tell them that a salary can make you cash rich for a short term of for a short while, but ESOPs can make you wealthy. So there's a difference between rich and wealthy. I think ESOP bridges that gap for me.
Fantastic. Kapil?
I won't further understate the value of ESOPs as a retention or a motivation or an ownership tool. I would just say needs to be flanked by extremely strong communication and conviction and transparency for it to be meaningful, is what I would leave with.
And Khushbu?
For me, I would like to say to the founders or the management who's actually using ESOP as a tool, it's a currency. So spend wisely and stay compliant, because otherwise it would be a dead investment.
Yeah.
And the employee who's actually getting ESOPs, you are taking a bet on the company and the founder. And once you take it, try staying long, because that's the time when you will get your fruits.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everybody. I think there's loads to pick up on there. I mean, firstly, that the sharing is good. The sharing brings everybody on board. I think came across very powerfully in our conversation. It's one thing sharing if people don't know what they've got. So the communication piece that Kapil just reiterated there at the end is imperative. If I don't know what I'm getting, how can I value it, to be honest? And I think then the other piece is, it's one thing having the philosophy and getting everybody vested. It's another thing people being able to be communicated around it. But then if you're not keeping it compliant, as Khushbu reminded us there, then it's not worth a lot. And so on all of those things, isn't it fortunate that Trika Invested is literally to do these things, both to help you set up your scheme, to help you communicate and share with your team members about the value and the opportunity that they're getting, but then also making sure that you stay compliant. I mean, that's absolutely fundamental for us to make sure that everybody who's on the platform remains compliant. That's our responsibility. We take away that cost complexity that normally stops people from setting up schemes, actually running them well. That's what we're here for. And so you can reach out to us at trika.co or vested.com. That's VESTD.com. And thank you again, everybody, Chinapa, Khushbu, Kapil, Mayank, for joining us for this session. And I hope we'll have more to share with people as we move forward. Thank you very much, everybody.